Well, hopefully, they both thought it's okay. It's kind of, I got it from the women's presentation. I wanted to say that
Yeah, but downtown? That's why it says it's a significant money.
So it was a petty theft.
No, they do all your own.
Oh, well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kelly. Just a very quick review. I read this at the last meeting, but the format that we use, of course, there's a moderator. Questions will be submitted in writing. There are slips on each table for you to write your questions. They will then be presented to the candidates. Start off with, each candidate has 5 minutes if he wishes to make opening remarks or any comments that he has. Then the questions will go first to one at 2 minutes to answer the question, and then the opposing candidate has a minute for rebuttal. And we will switch back and forth. I will flip the proverbial quarter to see who's the one that gets to go first. And Sam, you look like an honest man, so
that got a laugh.
you call it, and I'll flip it over there, and you tell me. And heads, Jamie goes first. Tails, Keely goes first. Okay?
Heads.
Heads.
So keep it short.
Thank you. Be sure and bring your questions up and just drop them here. I have extra sheets if you need them. And without any further ado, the timer will be first warning, and your time is up. So, Jamie, you're on.
Okay, thanks. I want to thank the Rotary for hosting this. My name is Jamie Johnson. I live in North Hudson. My wife, Jean, is here today. She recently received her doctorate in clinical psychology, and so I'm very proud of her. We have 3 children. Alex, who is 11, she goes to the middle school. Luke is 7, he's in 1st grade. And Sarah is 5, and she's in kindergarten. We've lived in North Hudson now 8.5 years, and came to Hudson when we got married. The same year we got married, we bought a house in North Hudson, and I got a new job, and I worked for the Lowman Nelson Law Firm. And now, in the last year, was elected a partner of that firm. So I've been defending people who get sued. That's what I've done for a living for the last 8.5 years. Before that, I was a prosecutor in Eau Claire County, and before that, worked on the Court of Appeals, and before that was an assistant prosecutor in Langlade County. That's kind of my background, my schooling. I went to UW-Madison Law School, Carthage College for undergraduate, that's in Kenosha, and grew up on a farm in the southern part of the state. So I've kind of gotten around the state, and now we've made this our home, and we love this area. That's pretty much the biography we have at the tables, the literature. I've also been involved in the community, and my wife and I are both Sunday school teachers at Bethel, where our family goes to church, Bethel Lutheran Church here in Hudson. And I've also coached at T-ball and Hudson girls basketball at the 5th and 6th grade level. And 6th grade also happens to be the year that I teach Sunday school, and I've coached Little League before as well, so I tend to like that age group. And I think that with 3 children, I'm concerned for their future, so that's why I'm running for state representative. And you probably know that I've run for this job before, and even though I didn't make it, I'm still committed to serving the folks, and I want to be your next state representative. We're focusing on issues as we go door to door. I'm listening to thousands of people. Between the 2 campaigns, we've probably knocked on 20,000 doors. And the couple of the things that we hear most are taxes, education, and then the other issues vary between gun control and land use and crime. Now, as far as taxes, I would like to see the tax relief be targeted more towards property tax relief, because if you look back over the last 10 years, the income tax rate hasn't increased, the sales tax rate hasn't increased, but our property tax bills have increased. Now, some of the mill rates in localities have been going down because some of those communities are growing communities with rising property values. But overall, our property tax bill has gone up over the last 10 years, and I would like to see the tax relief targeted towards that first. Puts us on more level playing field with Minnesota when we can have better property tax relief. It also, in order to get us on a level playing field with Minnesota, I would also like to see elimination of the sales tax on clothing. And this is something that would not be a very expensive item for the state. It would cost, the estimate by the Legislative Audit Bureau is about $79 million. And with our surpluses now estimated in excess of $400 million, that there's plenty of surplus there to allow for elimination of the sales tax on clothing. It would help this area in particular because it would put retailers on a level playing field with Minnesota. It would encourage people to shop on this side of the river. It would encourage retailers to expand maybe where they hadn't been expanding into the clothing area. And when people go shop for clothing, they shop for more than just clothes. They shop for other things, and that also encourages more spending on this side of the river. I guess we'll be getting into the other issues with the questions, but I want to thank you again for having us here.
Thank you, Jamie. Kitty, 5
Thanks.
minutes.
5 minutes is a long time, so I'm really not planning on going 5 minutes. I appreciate the opportunity to come back to Rotary. This is always fun. It's kind of a trip down memory lane. As we explained years ago, this Rotary Club is 1 month older than I am, and I was the first woman president of the club. So it does evolve, but it's great to be back and see all the old friends. As many of you know, my family has a long history in this district. We've lived, worked, and farmed out in this area for over 100 years. My Irish grandfather farmed on F, and my Italian grandfather came down from Cumberland and worked in the car shops. When my 100% Irish mother married my 100% Italian grandfather, that was a pretty big deal in Hudson back then. And needless to say, we think it worked out very well. I'm the oldest of 7 children. I have 6 younger brothers. The 7 of us are 9 years apart. So coming to have lunch at Rotary is a lot like going home and eating lunch with your brothers. The zings are frequent, except I didn't have a sister like Paula, who really dishes it out over there. I graduated from the Hudson High School many, many years ago, but interestingly was an experiment in one of the original pilots of Peer Helpers. In 1967, what was then the Tri-County Mental Health Clinic asked if I would serve as a big sister to a little elementary school boy who was having some severe problems in his relationships with women. And if I would spend 4 hours a day with him after school every day, which we did for 3 years to see if we would be able to have a positive influence on his life. And it does work. And I'm really congratulating you on seeing these programs go into full swing and with kids helping one another. I graduated from River Falls in 1973 and was with a degree in secondary education and social studies. And I have my master's degree from Illinois State University in curriculum and supervision. Teaching jobs were really hard to come by, so I was fortunate enough to help open up a high school in White Bear Lake. It was called Mariner High School, and then get a job opening another new school in Westmont Senior High. There I helped supervise other teachers and write curriculum, but I also taught children who were going to be expelled from school. I had them in a self-contained classroom for 4 hours a day. That was truly a great learning experience for raising my 3 sons later. When we were in Illinois, I married my husband, Frank. We've been married for 23 years. It sometimes feels like 25. We have 3 boys, Christopher 20, Matt 18, and Mike, who's almost 17. We were transferred around the country and were living in Georgia briefly when we realized the value system of the Midwest is something you can't appreciate until you leave it. We made the conscious decision to return home. Number 1, we wanted my kids to know that they're from a large family and to be part of that family. Number 2, we wanted them raised in the value system of this area. And we were lucky enough to be able to purchase the house I grew up in. We bought our own small business where you all know we sold hearses. When we owned that business, we learned the challenges that face all small business owners and that the impact that government can have on small business. After we had the company for 5 years, my husband decided he hated it, and we sold it. I was fortunate enough at that time to be able to come to work in the Hudson Chamber, which is an incredible opportunity to do that kind of work in your own hometown. We were able to participate daily in all of the issues that face each and every one of us in the district. Taxation, education. We participated in the implementation of Pierce County's welfare reform pilot program. We worked at economic development from the ground up, from marketing to companies, to recruiting them, to fielding their phone calls, to working to retain businesses here that pay head of household jobs. We started the Manufacturers Council to be able to address issues like child care, transportation, and welfare reform, how to hire the employees who were coming out of that market. As you know, I did not set out my life to become an elected official. My life has more or less led me to this point. I never had considered entering the race before because I felt that the elected officials we had were doing an excellent job. I worked with Sheila on many, many, many of the projects that we dealt with. While I've always been in the public arena, I had never been in politics. And when this opportunity became available, I hadn't even thought of it till people started to say, you know, Kitty, we've watched you work in the community. We've seen how you do it. We know how you build your partnerships, and we know that you have the experience to be able to get things done. And I'm hoping to be able to bring these experiences together so that we can work together to shape our future without losing sight of our past. Done.
Thank you. Questions? Jay, will you go around, twist some arms, and pick up the questions, bring them in? In the meantime, I have a seed question to start with, and we'll start with Jamie for a 2-minute answer. Should Wisconsin provide for indexing income tax rates to allow for inflation?
Yes, the short answer to that, I believe they should index income tax rates. And in fact, I think that the legislature did pass that, and it's going to go into effect now. For about 10 years there, or it might have been longer, about 14 years, there was no indexing of the income tax rates. And what that allowed to do is that the median incomes actually slid into the top tax bracket. And now, if you make more than $20,000 a year, you're in the highest tax bracket in Wisconsin. And so, which is, I think, a 6.74%, or right in there. The fact of the matter is now that it is indexed, I'm in favor of keeping that, and it's only fair because then that way inflation doesn't push people into the higher tax brackets.
Thank you. Kitty, rebuttal?
Well, it's not a rebuttal, but I agree the indexing is there, and this is a good thing, but I think we need to look at providing permanent tax relief, not just some accommodations to adjust for inflation. That's why I believe we should have a 10% across the board income tax rate reduction. Go for permanent tax relief. When we're collecting surpluses in the amounts that we have been, it means people are paying too much. And we can identify they're paying too much in property taxes, so we need to keep working on permanent reduction of property taxes. But there isn't a taxpayer in Wisconsin who pays too little. And if you're not paying property tax and you're paying income tax, you're still paying too much. So I think we need to reduce those rates across the board.
Thank you. I think maybe we have touched on the tax question of this next one, so I'll hold that back and go to another one. For Kitty, what role should state government have in encouraging the construction of moderate income housing? 2 minutes.
State government, I assume, right?
I get a yes from the...
One of the biggest issues that faces our area, and it's not just the Hudson area, it's everywhere, is labor shortages. And part of it is, in this area, the people who work here are having a difficult time affording to live here. And affordable housing has become a real issue, particularly as the value of our houses go up and up. I think the government should provide the programs for it to be able to provide the financing assistance, et cetera, as they have. I believe, though, that the other issues as to placement, siting, et cetera, are with the local units of government.
Yes, I think that on the state level we should assist in financing groups that want to be able to build the low-income or moderate-income housing so that it's affordable and these are mostly the duplexes and smaller single-family homes so that people can use that as a starter home for them, and then they become part of the community and be able to expand into, as their incomes rise, they're able to get more expensive housing. But we definitely need to have a role in encouraging the low-income housing. Where it's going to be, or moderate-income housing, and where it's going to be should be a local decision.
Thank you. This next question, there are two parts. I think I'll ask both of them, and then you can answer. The first part is, what is your position on spending caps? And the second part is, can there be tax cuts if spending caps are removed?
Okay. The first, spending caps. Now there's spending caps for both local municipalities and for school districts right now. There's revenue caps actually, which if you have a cap on how much revenue you can take in, there's should also be a cap on how much you can spend. Most districts are not spending more than they take in. On the local government level, there are some caps as well, and I think that sometimes these caps can be arbitrary, and having a specific percentage on one year where a community may need to spend more, they may be able to spend less in the second and third year, and so being able to have some type of spending measures that account for evening out the spending over a period of time and gradually phasing in larger projects that local governments or local school districts may need is important. But I think that sometimes the arbitrary limits, what we need is governments making tough decisions. Rather than relying on just arbitrary limits, we need legislators, we need council members making the tough decisions, not relying on just caps, but rather saying what we do need and what we don't need. We should be able to legislate a budget that doesn't increase at 3 times the rate of inflation just because there's arbitrary caps. And I think that we can still have, I guess the second part to that was we can still have tax cuts because we're having a projected $450 million surplus. And I think that when you budget right, you don't have to spend more in any one particular area. Or in all areas rather, you can focus. It's priorities for spending, and rather than spending all over the board more, you can recognize where you have to cut. And I think that that's important, is to make sure that we cut in areas where we don't need and not just increase spending altogether.
Response, Kitty?
The 2/3 funding cap is a very serious commitment that the 2/3 funding of school that the state has made to the program, and it's been pretty healthy in some respects. We've seen a lot of referendum activity and a lot of new buildings going up in districts that otherwise had not been able to do it because of this 2/3 commitment, and that is protected by the caps, by the spending caps. You cannot put the money in and take off spending caps and think that this is going to work. We can't say we're going to spend more money this year and hope to make it up later, because we've seen what happens when you do that. It's kind of like having a credit card, and all of a sudden you've got this big balance up there, but you don't have the more revenues coming in. I maintain you've got to have the 2/3 and the caps together, and that without that, you absolutely cannot produce property tax reform or reduction.
Okay. Oh, an old subject. Your position on the Stillwater Bridge.
The original conversations of the Stillwater Bridge started before I was born. I really am hoping that they will be concluded before I die. We have got to have a bridge, and it's time that we get down to the serious business and say we are going to get this bridge. We were at a meeting that was supposed to be the final draft of the compromise proposal for the bridge. We have so much money invested in this project already. I was very disappointed to hear at that consensus meeting that groups would say, well, you know, this isn't the part that I wanted, so I don't know that I'm going to sign on and support it. That's not how you spell consensus. Consensus is working together. I hope that we don't wait until we have an ambulance stuck behind that lift bridge and somebody can't get across, and then we decide we need to build a bridge. We have got to build that bridge.
I agree. I supported the bridge 2 years ago. I still support the bridge. It's not that much closer to being built. It's been through the courts once already. Hopefully it doesn't have to go through the courts again. I think that the groups that are working for the compromise, it's a good move in the right direction. It's a little slow in coming, but if there's anything that I could do as your next state representative to speed that process, I would try to do that, because I've been one of those people that have been stuck on that bridge. And I should say, not on the bridge when it's going up, but actually on one side or the other, waiting for it to come back down, and the traffic is definitely a problem. And we have to look at the realities and definitely go forward with the bridge.
Okay, should the line item veto as is presently set up in Wisconsin be altered to give less power to the governor in changing legislature? What's your thoughts?
Actually, I'm in favor of the line item veto, because I think it is important. I'd like to see it on the federal level, where they probably need it a lot more. On the state level, we've been balancing our budgets. In fact, now we have a surplus. And I think we need to have a line item veto in some form. Whether it needs to be in the form where actual words can be crossed out and different, or numbers can be crossed out and different numbers put in, that seems to be a lot of power for any particular unit. But so far it's been working, and I don't see any immediate reason to be changing it.
Basically, we agree. There's a good track record of it. It's been a useful tool, and it's worked to the benefit of the citizens.
Okay, for Kitty, land use will become more important as our population grows. What would be your approach to preserving good farmland for future food production?
Oh, this is just a critical issue in this district. As you travel up and down the district, which most of you, I'm sure, know goes from like St. Joseph Township down to Maiden Rock, Hager City, Plum City, there's a real distinction between the northern end of the district and the southern end of the district. It's a unique, gorgeous, beautiful area whose heritage is agriculture. We all know that there's only 3 industries that produce wealth: mining, manufacturing, and agriculture. We have to retain agriculture as part of the who and what we are. I've been to almost every land use meeting held in the district, because their zoning maps were due October 1st to the county. This is probably one of the most passionate discussions you can attend. And if we could take these emotions and put them in a bottle and send them to legislators who come from urban areas, they might have a better understanding of what's going on over here. We've got to preserve farmland. Those who want to farm should not only be allowed to, they should be encouraged to do so. I believe that the state's role in this is to find the programs that make that preservation possible. The local governments should and are able to do their zoning, and that's the way it belongs. That is up to the local citizens. But we have to find tools that allow us to preserve our heritage.
Yes, and I'm in favor of retooling the farmland preservation program on the state level, because that is necessary for local governments to have access to the resources to do it. But it still needs to be a local decision, and I have seen a lot of that emotion as well. You've got different people who want to move into the area, and then they see the rural character, that's why they moved here, and then they want to keep it that way and not let other people move in either. But on the other hand, they ought to have a right, and that is the people that live here ought to be deciding the character of the local community. And on the other hand, also the property owners, their rights need to be balanced, and they need to be heard. And if they want to be able to sell their farm because that's their retirement, they ought to be able to do so. But we need to preserve farmland where it can be done and still retain the rural nature, because we don't want to turn this area into another Woodbury. That's the one thing that I've heard on Doris quite a bit, and so they would like to see some farmland preserved.
Okay, back to the tax question. I have 2 questions here, and they sort of fold over, so I'm going to read both of them. First one's quite lengthy. A recent article in Kissinger's magazine compared personal tax burdens state by state. Wisconsin was second highest in the nation, with New York being the highest. Combined real estate, sales, and personal property income tax in Wisconsin was in excess of $11,500 /
something. Per
Something.
year. Per year.
per year, yes. For the average taxpayer, the lowest tax burden in the
Who wrote this? Something was
yeah,
$2,300.
well, it's $2,300 per year. What would you do to lower the personal tax burden in Wisconsin? And this other question says, what, if any, areas of the Wisconsin income tax code do you feel could be changed to make it more fair? So I'm going to put those two together.
Okay, just a minute now.
Am I up?
Yeah.
Okay. That's right. Wisconsin is second in the nation in overall taxes, and state and local taxes. I think it's third. So Minnesota, I heard a commercial. They wanted to claim that they were number 2 in state and local taxes. But either way, we're in the top 10, and I would like to do something about that. Get us out of the top 10 in taxes. We do enjoy a good quality of life with the different services that are provided, but I think they can be done less expensively, and we can do more in the private sector rather than having government, rely on government for everything. That's how we get Wisconsin out of the top 10, is by spending less and then taxing less. And where I think that the taxes ought to be reduced is in the property tax area, the real estate, and in the sales tax, lowering the sales tax for exempting clothing. And those 2 areas, that would reduce our tax burden. And then we need to look at other areas where we can start cutting government spending and seeing where the private sector can be providing services at a less expensive rate than the public sector. And so it's got to be a combination of cutting spending and then a commitment to tax cuts. And I think the other part of the question had to do with making the income tax more fair. I don't know if more fair means more progressive so that those can afford more or paying more. Right now, I don't have any specific plan to reshift all the taxes. I think that needs to be worked out with our economy. It's had a little kilter here this last month, and seeing how that levels off, because much of these surpluses that are projected are based on different areas of growth. And the income tax plan of a $2 billion cut is based on estimates that the economy is going to continue to grow at 5%, when actually this last year it was more closer to 3 to 4%. And I think we need a more conservative approach rather than estimating that's going to be higher. We should instead, in fact, rely on a lower estimate for what the growth of the government or growth of the taxes are going to be, rather than a higher one.
Kitty?
Wisconsin has a reputation of being number 1 in a lot of things. Being number 2 isn't usually bad unless it happens to be this category. That's not one where we wanted to be. The years that we've spent working on these issues here and through the Chamber have proved 2 things. The number 1 way that you lower property tax and all tax burden is to do it permanently, not to shift it, not to provide part-time credits, but to do real reform. Number 1 way is reducing the cost of government. When we did the Pierce County Welfare Reform Program, it became glaringly evident that if you could simplify, streamline, and eliminate the duplication of some programming, that dramatically lowers the cost of government. If it means exploring opportunities of privatizing some of the things that are currently being done by government, and it comes out to be more effective, that's a way you reduce government costs. Those are the things we need to explore. Number 2, you provide permanent relief. And we're able to do that, I maintain, by continuing to reduce property taxes, by providing the 10% rate reduction across the board to income tax, by maintaining the capital gain credit for people who are selling their family businesses or their family farms to another family member, and you provide the incentive and the credit and the assistance for people who are doing and trying to care for themselves. For example, a tax credit for families who bring their senior parent in to live with them. Bringing your family member in rather than putting him in the nursing home should not be financially devastating. And last but not least, maintaining the 100% tax credit for seniors who are making long-term care policy premium payments.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the written questions, which I have. We'll go to the next part of the program, which is questions from the floor. We will allow a question and a follow-up question. In other words, but the follow-up question must be on the same subject as the first question. You can't jump around.
Got it.
And you may direct the question to either candidate, and then the opposing candidate will have an opportunity to comment after they've spoken. So, do we have anyone that has a question from the floor? Yeah.
I'd have one for either one answer. If you had to do one thing and you could do anything you wanted, what's the one thing you would do to improve education or anything? Either, I don't think.
Okay.
The one thing that I would incredibly offer or proponent or try to work for is that we all know that education has to be everybody's partnership. That we right now are coming dangerously close to a we-they mentality about education, and it's not supposed to be this way. This is about educating our children for their future. This is everybody's partnership. And right now we know that the QEO feels discriminatory to educators, and they're right. This whole reformation of how we fund schools is a work in process. In order to make this effective change to be beneficial to all, but number one, to the kids, we need to have everybody who holds pieces of that puzzle come together and bring their pieces with them. We need the community, we need parents, we need educators, we need the schools, and we need the kids. We need to build a working partnership that takes all of this into account to be able to address it for the future.
I think as a state legislator, maybe less that we do, the better. Maybe if we give more flexibility to local governments, local school districts, and allow them to be more creative in the way that they can handle discipline, curriculum, the less state mandates, the better. I think Madison doesn't necessarily know what's best for Hudson or Superior, the outstate, and I think that we've had too much centralized government, and I would like to see local school districts developing academic standards that make it clear that when you're getting a diploma, it really means something, and that you have the skills necessary to get out into the workforce, and then enforce those with graduation exams so that when you met those skill levels, those basic skill level areas, that you have a diploma that means something. And also making sure that we have smaller class sizes in the primary grades so that when they get those basic skills, they're able to achieve and be more successful in the later grades. So I think that also expanding the youth options program. I know that you said any one thing, but again, when you are able to give the local governments and local school districts the flexibility to implement these programs, then I think you're helping them out rather than dictating some kind of mandate from Madison, because that's the other way that we can cut overall spending and overall taxes and get us out of the top 10 is less unfunded state mandates.
Hey, another question? Jay?
Seems like you agree on many issues, and I'm wondering if maybe each of you could take a minute or two and just tell us how you identify a couple issues other than taxes in which you differ. Maybe try to draw the contrast between each of you.
Okay. Jamie?
Well, I guess that we've had a couple debates, and as it's been reported in the paper and as quoted by Tommy Thompson, there's not a lot of difference, I guess, between us. I think that maybe that's the direction of the district, and that is that people want to see less government, not bigger government, and they want to see a candidate that has moderate positions, not this extreme partisanship. And so what I would go down to Madison and do is try to be independent, because I've agreed with some of the ideas that Governor Thompson has had. Just because he's a Republican doesn't mean that I'm going to go down there with the idea that I'm going to have to buck whatever he has. I think that there's not just Republican ideas or Democrat ideas, but just good ideas that work for the people. And I think that we may have more similarities than we have differences. I don't know of that many issues where we differ significantly. I guess on maybe one social issue on the abortion question would be one area where we differ. You said not taxes, and I think we've gone into that, where we differ on how we would approach the surplus and eliminating that. And so I guess those would be some of the areas.
It is interesting that we come out this close on issues. We have in the district the opportunities to be able to select people who are going to be the strong independent voices, I think, which what a lot of them are looking for. When we blend together on issues as closely as we do, then I think it boils down to experience and background. And that's what I believe is one of the biggest distinctions between the two of us, is the community involvement, the years of leadership, participating within projects, and the track record of getting things done.
Any further questions? Walt?
If you had the choice between, because I'm in the business and in terms of helping people with their income taxes and so forth, it's a very painful experience for a lot of people. Each and every year, it's the worst time of the year, it's very stressful. If there was a way to get rid of that and replace the income tax, how would you do it? I'm going to ask both of you.
Kitty?
How would you get rid of income tax?
If you had if you could replace it, how would you do it, and when would you do it? I mean, do you think it's a good idea?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion on doing flat tax, and very honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know not only the trepidation that you go through when you're filling it out, but what I hear from the people in the district as we walk around is the backlash and resentment and almost anti-Gestapo feeling to the IRS. And that's what they want and got rid of is predominantly the IRS. Many people feel that you need to pay a tax in order to get the services that you receive. The question is, are they in line with what you're getting? And very few people have honestly said I shouldn't pay taxes. But the question is, how and for what? But mostly we hear them say, get rid of the IRS.
There are states that don't have income tax at all, but they have very high sales tax. State of Washington, where I have a brother that lives out there, he pays, I think it's 9 or 9.5% sales tax. And I don't know, I think that could be also bad for business, because if we have a 10% sales tax and the other states are significantly lower, it's going to discourage people from doing business in the state. And I would not replace it with increasing the corporate taxes, because right now we enjoy a fairly low standing. We're about 49 out of the 50 states when it comes to corporate taxes. And I don't want to do anything that's going to dramatically increase that, because that also could have a huge impact on the quality of life that we have in the state. So I don't know if that dramatic of a shift in income tax, I would not favor that, completely eliminating it and replacing it with some other form. I would like to be able to reduce the reliance on the income tax by being able to re-examine some of these programs and try to reduce that, because the income tax is going straight to the state. The property tax, I think, ought to be more local, and that's why I want to reduce unfunded state mandates, and I want to reduce or increase the state's commitment to an adequate level of funding for education, so it's not so dependent on property values and the property taxpayers, the homeowners and the farmers.
Any further questions? Very well. I want to thank Kitty and Jamie both for coming.
Thank you.
I think either of them would do a good job. It's too bad we can't send them both to Madison. Voters
We
will
could split the
decide.
salary then, huh?
So thank you both for coming. That concludes the program. I'm going to turn it back to Kelly to